All right. Recently, now that this comet Atlas has come around into us, a lot of weird things are coming out, and it just seems so strange nowadays compared to what it was not too many years ago, and even whenever I was a kid, for when we had Comet Hale Bopp come through. But then let's go way back to when I was a kid, Comet Kohoutek and stuff. And there was a little mentions back then. Now, we didn't have the infrastructure of the internet and having all this knowledge come out like this. You'd see it on the news or mentions of things and stuff like that. And it spurred me to look into stuff. And I thought it was odd that we had the torrid meteor shower whenever I was a kid. And it's the same time about every year, which is odd. And it made me think that it's something that's somewhat stationary, and it takes us a year to get back around to run into it. But this isn't necessarily the case, for it seems to be a broken apart asteroid, much like this ellipse that you see here. And there are parts of it, okay, and I'm just going to give you a hypothetical. There are parts of it, like this whole half here, from here around to here, that have a large amount of bigger pieces in it. And I'm not talking the size of this thing that's shown in the picture behind it, but larger pieces. In other words, they're gonna make it through the atmosphere. Okay? By contrast, the other 2/3 of this thing is pretty much light. But there's about half as many big pieces in this half or third as there is in this 1/3. Okay? And it keeps going around and around at a different rate that we go around and around and come through it. And I remember whenever I was a kid and I had that car that I showed you my 5,000 reveals nipple reveal vid or whatever, but driving through the country here in Texas in spring into summertime, you would get certain times you would run into bugs that would be in a patch. Especially if you're out rural, you really notice this, and it's almost like gnats, and you see a gnat in a pile and you run through it. But when you run through it at 40 miles an hour, it's like, and it just hits you and stuff like a shotgun blast. And this is kind of what's happening. Every year we come right through that vent of the torrid meteor shower. And it's supposedly, and I believe totally in the idea that it is the Day of the Dead for a lot of people from around the world. People in South America had this as the Day of the Dead way before the people over here had the Day of the Dead and All Saints Day and so on like that. And people made connections a long time ago. This is not my research, and nobody ever knew this or anything like that. It's just putting a bunch of things together and then having a rational mind behind it. And you can get over worried a lot of times, and I've thought a lot of times in my childhood I'm over worried. And I remember driving out of town just a little bit whenever I was a kid and running through a patch, and it sent in my mind that idea of, oh, we're running through that meteor shower. And then we had really just recently been through the other half of it, for we run through it twice. It's kind of like, it's kind of like we run through that part of it there, and then later we'll run through that part of it, if you will. And it's because it's on a tilt to us. It's on an angular to what we go around. But no matter what, we seem to run around it. Well, that'll tell you a few things. And one thing it tells me, that if it is so targeted on our ellipsid form, that it hit us a long time ago, stretched out into what it is, and it's been going on for some time. And it's, look, if it's local to our song on the record, if you will. From the center of the record to the outside of the record, you would say the very center of the record's the sun, and the last song on the record is going to be Mercury. Then you'd have to skip a song and say there's Venus, and you skip a song. Anyhow, and of course, in this reality, the record would be about 40 foot across, or in diameter, but in reality, we would be somewhere in this, second song in, third song in, second song in area. And ironically, that's right where the scratch is on the record. And it's not like the scratch on the record is wobbled out of that, but it seems to be targeted in on that. And I know they've done some investigation on it, but the seeming thing for people to have done back whenever they were first studying this was to quell the fears of the public, right? And who knows, if somebody said, hey, well, some asteroid might hit us one day, then everybody would pull their hair out and run around in circles. And I don't think that at all, but it might cause people for even more concern towards something like this. And when we started doing this space thing and talked about Star Wars, and it's like, that moon looks pretty beat up there too, and all this thing's been hitting enough times. Maybe we ought to do something about that too. You talk about Star Wars and how it may inflict this or inflict that, and people have even said silly things, but it's not so silly, that all those satellites that we don't use, why don't we put something up there and vaporize those? Or see if we can utilize some kind of technology that would either burn them up in our atmosphere or sling them towards the sun. What the hell? Well, there's that idea that what you do is you put something on an asteroid, and you put an ion engine or something on it, and it hits the asteroid, and then it starts pushing on it, and it doesn't do much, but it slowly pushes it. But the fear there is that, well, it slowly pushes it on a new orbit. Now we've got to trajectorize that new orbit, and it's not going to hit us now, but in 72 years, it's going to hit us again, or whatever goes on. Then there's the other idea that, well, what we should do is just take it and slam it into the sun. But then there's that idea that maybe whenever comets and things slam into the sun, they cause an ejective that comes off of it, which could be a solar flare and blah, blah, blah. And this isn't such a great idea either. But it's the best that we have going on, but just make sure it's not facing towards us. And so now you have to go through all this trouble to try to find it. So what do? Well, we do something. We don't go, well, blah, 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 and then not do anything. Look, we have to think of this on the idea of this is what's sustaining people on this planet. And yeah, it doesn't happen all that often, but we're kind of overdue. And a lot of studies of these catastrophists have shown that we're kind of overdue, and that we may have been getting lucky. And this little side over here of the deal, this 1/3, that's got much more than the rest of it does, although there are little clusters around there, and some of the stuff over there may even be bigger than the biggest stuff over here. We don't know. It's just all assumptions because we haven't gone up enough testing. But the idea is we really haven't run through this but a couple of times in the last 1,000 years, and we've been getting lucky as hell going through the other side of it. And when we go through the other side of it, we've been getting fairly lucky too. And that's just this torrid meteor storm, and we know it's out there, and it's this thing that we know that when we take this ride around on the bugs, we're going to run into it. So if we know that, we should probably launch something up into space, and whenever we're coming right into it a week or two in advance, launch it out there and get it into the area and see if you can see what's going on, anything else, and then leave it as we pass it by and try to investigate and have it use radars and things like that and say, okay, it's really a vent of line of stuff through here, and there is a pretty big chunk right here. Well, what are we going to do about that? Well, I don't know. Maybe next year or the year later. It might take us a couple of years to build one, but let's build something that says we're going to push on that thing. And when we come back close to it, we're not going to be there anymore. We might be on the other side of it, but we'll put it out in the trajectory, and then we'll guide it over there to it. We'll have it attached to it, and we'll throw it into the sun. The one thing we don't want to do is throw it out there on an odd trajectory and whoopsie, and then that is going to hit us, and we go, well, it wasn't even going to hit us before, right? You know, so I thought it through 1,000 of these thoughts, and what's weird is some of them will come within 4 seconds of bugs splattering on my windshield when I was a kid driving through the countryside. But what's odd is I sometimes get that same aspect or that same feeling whenever I see things like this in all of the movies, you know, and Terminator, whenever they show that lady out there with the kids and all that stuff in the school, and then boom, and it just blows through there. And you can imagine if this hit, it would be not even that situation. It would be much worse. What's odd about that is supposedly this is rough to scale of some downtown city, and I don't know if that's LA or Vegas or something. There's a couple of hills in the background, but that doesn't look like LA. Somebody might be able to verify it on the way that it even looks off of it here, but you project it as something that's maybe not quite as big as Dallas or Chicago or one of those, but close to it. But it has a suburb that's probably, you know, your whole picture probably goes 4 or 5 pictures to the left, 4 or 5 pictures to the right, and then it gets skinny and there's little suburbs out and around that hill and all that. But all that would be gone if something like this hit. In fact, truth be known, if something like this hit, it wouldn't even matter about this city. It would vaporize the city to where you couldn't have seen a remnant of anything. You would not see a piece of paper out of one of those buildings or anything that could be recognizable whatsoever. You would be lucky to find any remnant you could see that was some type of worked metal before. I'm serious whenever I say that. The person that would take the picture here that must be, I don't know, 4 to 6 miles away is no longer living. In fact, if there's a guy 50 miles away on a hill with a telescope watching the guy that's on the bluff up here overlooking the city as it comes down and hits, that guy's dead within 3 seconds too. In fact, if there's a guy another 150 miles either side of this that witnesses it, they're gone. But worse than that, within the next 48 hours, pretty much everybody's gone. This is one thing they call an air igniter, and at the point it does, it hits with so much kinetic punch that it causes a shock wave that causes spontaneous combustion, and it would ring around the world a couple of times. I showed a video not too long ago. It was one with an old Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads song, and it's tuned to this. And then there's another one with a Tool video song, and I think it got flagged. I made it again, and I slowed it down, and I slowed the video down, and it actually fit better. But regardless of that, and I don't want to sound like some fear-mongering asshole. I keep mentioning that during these things because it's you know, and I could be flashing a bunch of pictures of comets up here, and I thought I would go through those and everything, and of course it would break my concentration as if I had any to begin with. But one has to think about these things, that something like this that you're looking at is as big as or bigger than the Chixalub event that wiped out all the dinosaurs and took it down to a very limited amount of creatures whatsoever on the planet. Now, the thing we're looking at, the Younger Dryas, did take out the larger creatures on the planet at that time. All of the northern hemisphere, everything above the Tropic of Capricorn that was considered a larger creature, no longer existed within a short period of time after it. and the only remnants that got left of it are some rhinos and elephants, and those got hunted away while people were inhibiting that area because everybody was squished down in that area. And Africa, sub-Saharan, was pretty much neglected. It's the only reason there are creatures like that to this day. But we kind of know this. But America lost all of its too, and it didn't have a choice. And the Clovis people feel like they're gone, or it looks like just disappeared. And it took a long time for people to get back up on their feet. And whether you believe that they were space pirates at that time already in Star Trek, or you believe that they just were on the edge of doing something great, and it set them all the way back another 9,000 years. Because if you look at it, over the last couple of thousand years, we've done everything that you know of that's really worthwhile in humanity, like we were just ditzes before. And if you look at it in a whole day, from the last 10,000 years, but the last 10,000 years equals a whole day. In the last couple of hours, we've done pretty much everything that everybody usually thinks of. And in the last couple of minutes, have turned from pretty much people that ride horses like the Scythians and coaches and buggies, which is a little bit of an upgrade from towing a yurt around, to spacemen that are well aware of all these facts. And something tells me that, I get this weird echo all the time, and this echo of patterns and stuff, and this continual thing that's happened in humanity, and we're only experiencing one of it, like they talk about in the Atlantis tales and so on like that, where you only remember this last one, but there's been quite a few, right? That's what the Egyptians were saying. Now, people can say that's all bullshit and made up stuff and a song of fear, if you will, or a warning, if you will. And that's fine too. For warnings are there usually for good reason, just like mythology always serves a purpose. Look, if see this little crater up here I'm pointing at right now? Looks like a little hex shape a little bit. You see that? Like I'm sitting in the middle of it now. Right? That rock right there that probably caused that little dent off of it, that rock, if it came down through here on this trajectory, habam, everybody would be dead, including the guy 150 miles back. Not 150 miles back, but everybody'd be dead, and the people taking this picture wouldn't live through it, and everybody would be gone. But worse than that, it would affect the area 5 times that circumference around it, and then downwind and so on. And that's something that big. That's basically like, oh, well, a football stadium dropped on us. Well, what if it was twice the size of a football stadium? Well, you can get to certain sizes there, and it starts multiplying the amount of damage it does. It's kind of like the difference between dynamite and a nuclear bomb. And then nuclear bombs had a multiplier effect to them, right? Y'all probably well aware of the bombs that did Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which would be a size, a city about like this, were really kids' toys towards the ones that they made up after that. And now they've made ones that when it drops in, it clusters out and shoots them all out in different directions and overlaps the explosion. For different purposes. I don't know if you ever heard, but they miss Nagasaki. There was an old joke in the service, my dad said. He goes, it's tasteless, but the only thing true in life are horseshoes, hand grenades, and that you can trust in, and nuclear bombs. And I said, yeah, with nuclear bombs. And he goes, well, we missed Nagasaki by 2.5 miles, but it was in a kind of a bowl anyhow, and so it just deserved it anyhow. So close enough. Close in hand grenades works. Close in horseshoes, you still get a point for it. Close in nuclear bombs is still going to take it out. Close in something like an asteroid still does a lot of damage, and something like this that you're looking at would be more devastating, or as devastating as the Chixalub event. There are no dinosaurs. Listen, if there's this lobe down here and this bigger lobe, let's just say this is a baseball and a football, right? Because we aren't even seeing the top of this thing right now, but let's say this baseball on the right-hand side. If that was to hit the earth with any decent kinetic punch, it would set us all to the point that I doubt much of people would still be existing. It would reset us all. If there were people to exist after it, we would consider ourselves very lucky. What if they were considered themselves chosen somehow? What if they were to blame it on God? Or worse yet, what if they were to blame it on themselves? To say that they had quit being so holy, and so people quit paying attention. But we had figured out that holy by then had a lot to do with the stars and star worship and the seasons and everything, and people quit looking up, and cities like this made so much scattered light you couldn't even really see the stars anymore, and God got kind of mad and he threw a baseball at us. And you could actually see that coming about. He got so pissed off at the Bible people that he basically decided to cause a flood and make everybody go away. He shook up the snow globe, or basically if we were floating like a cork, he pushed us underwater here and then let us back up. Well, he didn't let us back up. Everybody died. The only people that didn't were on that special boat. Well, that's what we're led to believe. That comes from a local tale, and it never was supposed to be everybody on the earth. It was supposed to have been the people that are talking about the tale. And when you look at the ancient people that those come from, they come from that younger Dryas event that had gone through it, and it comes from even before that. But that younger Dryas event had caused it. In the Bible, it tells you that God said he was never going to do it again. And he gave us a rainbow and all that crap. I don't know anybody who would believe that there were never rainbows before that day. But regardless of that point, it happened again to these people in Sumeria, and they already had the deal that it would never happen again. So when it happened again, Abraham and them had left, and their gods had left them. Well, you can see in old people's thoughts too that whenever they get taken over, even though they feel like they've been doing good, their gods must have left them. And the Sumerians were kicking ass pretty good, but something happened devastating. And you have to believe that that flood was caused for something or somehow, and the gods must have left them to have let this happen. And that echo that I was talking about before is just like that right there is still echoed to this day. People believe in a remnant of that comes from all of this, from way back, and all of the religion that came out of it that seems to come from a common place. There's a common linguistics that goes with it too, that stretches all over the known world and further at that time. And you could see somebody, if they went through something like this, that let's say it happened in North America and all the people in Europe knew about it and it screwed over everybody, and all the people in North America must have died. But there was this remnant of them that was still around, and they knew how to build decent stuff, and they knew how to build things, and whenever they got finally to the new land, they had helped people to try to get it going. But they were passing it down father to son to child and pretty much lose it in a short period of time to just remnants of what it was and little ideals and some stories, and that's about all they had left. It reminds me of Mad Max whenever he finds those children that are living down in that niche in all the rocks in their little haven that they had, and that they had remembered the video, and they members, like remembering, and they had the little story down, and it was like shocking whenever I was, coming into adulthood. It's like, did something like that happen? Oh my God, that's, oh my, and they had a pilot in this plane that had some graying going on in the corners, and sure enough, he looks like him somewhat. So you have to be the guy and this thing and this Jesus, and you come back to save us. And he's like, what the hell? But you know, and this is just you making up things in your mind and possibilities or nightmares. And I've always told my daughters that nightmares aren't real, that they're you making up something that you might or might not know that you're already kind of scared of. Maybe because of something you saw or who knows what, but it'll pick up one time that you're not thinking of. And you'll have a dream that's something about it, and what would you do? And you're sitting there asleep in your bed, totally safe, while your brain goes through this idea, well, I would run and I would do these things and all this type of stuff, right? And so we come up to, as scientists and theorists and stuff like that, they look into stuff like this, but they're taught not to fearmonger the world in any way. And if they ever come out and say something like this, you think that something's gone wrong with the man, that he's lost it. And I'm not saying that we should, fearmonger this like crazy, or that after Halloween we should all go out and do something special about it and watch it all happen to make sure every year, or something stupid like that. I'm just saying we ought to put at least twice the effort that we do into it now, and then hold on, wait for it. What would we do if we realized right now, oh, there's one that's coming around like that? There's this one Apophis, they say, that's going to barely miss us and come in between us and the moon, and it's going to wing around and again. And if it comes through at that time and winds just right, next time it comes around, it's just going to smoke us. It's like 2029 or something like that. So, don't worry about it at all. Well, if we found out something like that was happening, we wouldn't have anything to do with it, about it. I mean, it's going to be one of those kiss your ass goodbye or try to do something stupid. And they said never bust one of these up because it'll cause a lot of specular damage. You're turning a bullet into a shotgun. But what if we blew it up into a shotgun and then right in front of that blew up a whole bunch more and tried to make it just not even work? Well, still a lot of that's going to rain down on us. And hey, you just made the torrid meteor storm again for the next 10,000 years, by the way. Think about that. And every year that we go rolling through this, it's a good chance of a problem, because it was that thing that was this big that we were going to stop. I feel like I just rambling on things, but hopefully it's it's hitting some home points for people here. Just what I think we should do is put twice as much into it, and we should put up something of an idea that what would we do. And people worry that, well, if there's an asteroid out there that isn't really affecting us and we go pushing on it, maybe we'll screw it up because, well, then it ran by Venus and Saturn came by, and next thing you know, it winged it right at us, and we should have never messed with it. Well, do we have the thing that pushes on it? Because we just push it then. But then you got to push it to where it doesn't end up a trajectory, or do we push it to where it barely misses the sun and it just turns and disintegrates into pieces? Or would that be bad because we just made a shotgun torrid meteor storm that we all run through perhaps again? Well, it goes to the outer limits, but then it starts coming back in, and we start having Earth-crossing asteroids. They're a little smaller, but now there's 150 of them rather than that one. So what do we do? Surely, I'm positive that the answer is not nothing. Nothing would be sad. Also, if we tried to make a group of committee that their idea was to spend a few years and a few $100 million and come up with nothing, that would be a disgrace. So we need to figure out, what would we do? And just devote twice as much money as we have now into something like that. Do we have any devoted towards it? Because look at this picture. It seems somewhat important that not only for the people of Tempe, Arizona, or where this is fixing to hit, but all of North America. But no, this one would be the world-ending event. This would be the world ender that we would never even be able to talk about in the future. for only half of it, in the smaller half, the baseball, this half here, would set us back like the dinosaur situation. But let me clarify again for y'all wasting all this time, and this came through my mind, but get to it in a minute, 20 minutes ago. But the Chixalub event crater is not something that's this big here. It's not that big. For it was something that's a little smaller than that city down there. You do realize that whenever something goes boom and makes a crater, that it's a little bit smaller than a crater. I had a picture in my mind whenever I was a kid that you could spin a globe and shoot at it with a BB gun and hope you didn't get unlucky, right? That's not necessarily the truth, because when the BB hit it, it would make boom and it would be a big old crack. So it'd be more like you stuck maybe not one of those black cats, but the little ladyfinger firecrackers in there. Pow. It'd be the same as like a nuclear attack. Pow. Oh yeah, and all that fallout doesn't get to fall out on the ground. It's stuck in your thin atmosphere right above you. It's going to cause a lot of problems. But that Chixalub event, only being a few kilometers wide, caused that crater that's, what is it, 6 kilometers wide by whatever, it's warped now somewhat. And they know that created bad enough to take out the dinosaurs. Now you realize that this left piece right over here would make a crater that we're looking at right now. It would be 5 times the size of the picture here. So that would be an earth-ending event, probably just the right side of it. For only something the size of a little bit bigger maybe than my pointer here coming down. Imagine it coming down and whoa, bam, and hitting there, and how everything would light up, and it would take a crater bigger than that city, like the red area, actually probably out to here and here. And what is that? That's 4 kilometers. That's just short of the dinosaurs. And how big is that? That's as big as my pointer, people. That's smaller than the little rock that's up here that we were talking about that might have made that dent in this giant thing that's floating out there. And now, in the statements, it said that this is one of these asteroids that we saw recently. And yeah, it reminds me, I think they saw that one where it flipped a little bit. It looks like a dum-dum a little bit, or a bowling pin kind of double built. This must be that one. And they just said, okay, well, here it is. Here's the size of the city. What do you think would happen? And the guy asked, what do you think would happen, if this happened? Would we live through it? I'm saying nothing would live through that if that happened. Nothing. It set us all back to where there might be 100 creatures left alive on the planet, plus some insects and some BS like that. And sure, cockroaches are still alive and everything, but oh man, what would happen to all the oceans? Well, there'd still be some fish left and everything, but there would be very little life left. And how long would it take for life to get to the point where we are today? I think, and a lot of people theoretically think, we were extremely lucky in a series of events to end up here 65 million years later. And I don't think I want to wait 65 million years just because people went, duh. And so I think we ought to really check into this. But we ought to also look into the trajectory of that Taurus meteor shower. And in doing so, we might figure out when it had happened and what had happened before. Because we kind of know the asteroid belt was caused by a great collision that perhaps caused Earth in the first place. There used to be an extra planet in here, and it's gone now, and we apparently inherited the moon and all these situations. Well, they want you to think that, oh yeah, that it was kind of chaotic back at the first, but nothing happens like that again. And it's like, well, I don't know if you or not, but people have been studying, and there are still bugs, and they swing them around in areas and things like that. And it apparently doesn't take much to kick some of this Kuiper belt material out and things along this line. There's a lot of Pluto and shaped objects like this out there. And like in that other video, I talked about how they say that Jupiter's the big king and he takes and swallows everything, and that's only if it comes in on his side aiming at him and it sucks it in because of its gravity. But if it's a little past, now think about this, if it's out here and it's a little past and going out, and that thing's coming in, it kind of goes after it and it pulls it into the inner, and it makes it want to go into the inner, and it doesn't quite meet it, and you'd be lucky if it hit it on the way round and over. But not only, I've watched some videos about this, I do check out some astronomy stuff and everything too. You've seen a couple little clips of my video, but I try to be a little well-rounded about it, and I've got to get off the subject sometimes to get back on it, if you know what I mean. And so I use alternate things. There's so much to this that I can even use something like this to be an alternate deal. But in that fact, they've figured out that not only does it save us all a lot, like what happened in the Shoemaker-Levy comet that spread apart but exploded into it, but if it would have got it close but not quite and exploded, it'd sling it into the inner. There's a 50-50 chance, depending on trajectory and where things are, that it would be trying to sling it inward. And if it was anywhere else but inward, let's give an example here again, people. If it was coming in from here and Jupiter was somewhere around in here, it would pull on it a little bit. But if it's anywhere past right in this range in here, it's going to take and pull it even in past Jupiter. It's going to help assist it. And then to expect that it hits it on its one chance on the way through before it takes it out is not a reasonable idea. Also, it hits the sun then. No, most of these things are appearing where they're not quite aimed at the sun, therefore they go around it a lot of times before enough pushes and pulls on it to where it does. In between, we take a chance where we're just coming through this, riding down a road on a motorcycle with their mouth open, just wondering if a bug's gonna fly up. And I just think that's a radically bad idea. Oh, this ain't the caliber of my normal videos. No, it's just something I thought of whenever I pulled up this. I pulled down through my menu and the guy goes, "You think we could live through this?" And I was like, "No." And then all these people are talking on it and stuff. Listen, this is a big American city, and most cities would fit inside the gray area inside of here. So you can imagine how much they would take out. This is a state killer, but no. The state would be pulverized, whatever it landed in. But everything around that would be gone too, and it would screw off the biosphere to a point. There would be a running burn at 700 to 800 miles an hour that would run all the way around the planet, burning everything up. Like just spontaneously combusting. And if it didn't take all of it and it only took half, that'd be incredible. Well, it looks like something of that caliber just happened to us 12,000 years ago, and it caused a massive hurt to the entire world. The species die-off there was much akin to the dinosaur die-off, and about, people don't usually realize that we've had 5 or 6 of these, and a lot of people have looked at it and said this is the thing, the catalyst that changed the world, that caused evolution, that it was at this point and slowly evolving, and then pow, and killed back to a little bit, but when it came back it diversified, and then pow, and then it diversified, and then pow. And it might sound great to you, oh, diversify and pow, and never will be great aliens. No, diversify and pow again, we won't be here, and ants will be like getting bigger and bigger, and pow. And it's just, it doesn't look like that's the chance to be taken. We've realized now that we've got to get off this planet, that there are rapidly becoming far too many people on this planet. It's dwindling its resources, it's causing all kinds of problems, and we're so humanitarians nowadays, there's no way that we can lessen that load on the planet by doing something like releasing a virus on people or anything. But if we don't get ready for it, Look, we don't have anywhere to go. Well, because we didn't even do what we thought we were going to do when I was a kid and make a space station and make the moon station so we could get good at that. So, like, well, if we can live on the moon, it's easy to live on Mars. Maybe we can start terraforming Mars, and we could, through technology, hold off things like this until we've got it going on. Well, what if Mars gets hit? That was just a step. And now we get these massive space trawlers that's a generation spaceship. It's big enough that it can control and hold somebody their entire lives. Sounds kind of sad living a life like this, but then they're headed towards Alpha Centauri or wherever, and they're trying to do this. And we can't even just send one ship off and hope it makes it, but there's got to be the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria, and they were lucky in the first place too, people. We've got to try to do something along this line and continue our pioneer aspect. It's kind of taken out of us, but it wasn't too long ago we were in the Wild West and all of those things. Well, once it come around and met everybody, what is the next frontier? Well, the next frontier is saving ourselves. The snake has finally gone around in a double recoil and bitten itself again, and so now we are at the point of being able to take us to the next level. There's so many things ahead of us that are problems that we could start solving, and while we're working on a few, something like this thing we're looking at shouldn't turn around and bite us on the ass to where we don't even have a chance to come back from it. Or let's just say something as big as the dent up there came out, something as big as that dot right there came out. Let's not lose London, or let's not lose wherever it hits. If it hit in nowhere, it would still cause a devastation to the planet you wouldn't be able to understand right now, that would be able to happen off of something as simple as that. If it landed nowhere out in the ocean, there would be so many gigantic tidal waves to come from that would affect more people than if it was to hit on the ground locally. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to do, and you can try to get me to believe that there's a government facility that's trying to think of things like this, but they aren't getting any funding, and they aren't getting anything done, and they aren't doing anything to try, and they sure aren't letting the American public know. And something like this, they should perhaps put out an ease statement, like, well, we're getting at the point of Armageddon in that movie where we could do something about it, and da-da-da. And once you tell you we're on top of it, as opposed to silence and crickets. Movies and thoughts keep coming out about it. Comets keep whizzing by. Last year we had 2 comets whiz by that we weren't aware they were coming, and we caught them both at the point that if they were going to hit us, we wouldn't have had much to say about it. We wouldn't have even had that Armageddon try. You see what I'm saying? When I was a kid, we were supposed to be the Jetsons by now and be able to do something like this and help ourselves and save ourselves, and we're still just like thumb up our butt and got something that looks like 5 times the size of Skylab going on. And I know a lot's come from it. I know I don't want to act like we ain't done nothing. No. A lot has come from it. But in the same breath, there's a lot that could be done that we're not even putting effort into. The military budget is so much more huge than this. And in fact, our budget to go to other countries to help their aid because they suck and are not able to cope with whatever's going on with them is bigger than our entire space budget. And while that sounds grateful and noble and valiant and non-selfish at all, and doing the right type of thing for us, but if we were doing the right type of thing for all of us, there might come a point where we would have to think about being a little more selfish for all of us. Think about that concept. The space mini people that figure all this stuff out would need to turn a little bit more selfish, but that in turn would help out all of us. If everybody would get behind the people trying to do something as opposed to pointing at them and white man bad and all these things, it would be amazing what we'd be capable of doing And if you think that's, some forced conjecture in any way, my grandfather saw in his lifetime people go from being in a chariot with horses to cars to planes, radios and television, and they landed on the frickin' moon and came back quite a few times. Must have been amazing during his lifetime. You could see something like this happen in your lifetime too, where something like that was going on, and they went to the moon, as you were growing up or before you grew up, and we've done these things, but where are we at now? Well, it looks a whole lot better everywhere now. Yeah, but we could go zoom. We could really go zoom, and maybe it would be the next generation that would really experience it as you were getting kind of grandpa, and you would be like, and I helped push that son of a bitch. I was behind the car pushing whenever it was out of gas, because somebody was an idiot and didn't want to pour gas in it. I don't know. I've gone on to too much of a rant of it anyhow. But yeah, what would I think about something if this happened right here? If it came in at 30,000 kilometers per second like a normal would do, we'd all be gone. And if it came in at 70,000, the Earth would be put back to a primordial, just a few species of things left. And it would take 65 million years for it to get to the point it was now, and no humans probably. Oh, I give it less than a 1% chance that any human on the planet would live through it. And it would probably be so small of an amount that would be inbred to the point that I wouldn't want to talk about what they came of. And would they even be able to describe and talk about what had happened before, and who the hell would they describe it to? Gotta go, guys. Peace.